All right. Hello, and welcome to my district profile. I'm Josh Felcher. I chose to do my district profile on Glendora Unified School District. The reason I chose to do my profile on Glendora Unified School District is because I'm currently an employee there. I work at Glendora High School as a biology and natural science teacher. I worked there. This is my second year at the district. So I wanted to do my profile on them, and luckily it was not taken at the time. So let's go ahead and get started. Uh, to start out, I want to give you guys some defining characteristics of Glendora Unified. So, number one, it is located in Glendora, California, and it's actually exclusively located in Glendora, California, as the name Glendora Unified might suggest. But it's not found. It doesn't go across city lines. It is a relatively small district compared to others, with under 8,000 students. Again, it is a single city, so 8,000 students, quite a bit if you consider that. But compared to something like LA USD or other districts around, I believe Bonita district is a lot larger because it's across two cities. Um, it's a relatively small district compared to others around it. It is a tight knit community, so Glendora itself. Very small community. Essentially, everyone knows everyone, which can be a good thing, can be a bad thing. But you have a lot of parent involvement in within Glendora's school district because of that tight knit community. There are 5 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and 2 high schools. So the 5 elementary schools here: Cullen, Lafayette, Sellers, Stanton, and Sutherland. The two middle schools are, Goddard and Sandburg, and the main high school is Glendora High School. There is a secondary high school. Whitcomb High School is actually a continuation school for those that need extra credits after attending Glendora High School. So getting into financial distributions. So relatively standard here. It's actually compared to, again, other districts around the area. Doesn't receive as much total revenue, but again, it's a little bit of a smaller district. So everything's pretty proportional here. The one thing that I wanted to point out that kind of highlighted to me was that 69% of all of that financial expenditure goes towards instructional expenditures. Essentially, those are for salaries, for upkeep of the schools. So a huge margin. So over 5,000 amount per student goes towards that. So really, really high margin goes towards maintaining instructional integrity within those schools. Student and staff support, pretty general. Administration, a little bit high at 12%. And then operations at 13%, relatively standard there. So nothing too out of the ordinary here. Federal is 5%. The local tax is actually a little bit lower than the average at 29%. And then state income it gives about 66% of that overall financing. Next, I just want to go over the demographics of the district. So there is a very average for the state of California, for the county, LA County. It's about average 0.03 Native American populations. Asian is a little bit just relatively about the same, but slightly lower than the county average. So 6.2% at Glendora and 7.8% overall. Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islanders, slightly less than normal, but again, 0.2% versus 0.4 within the margin of error. Filipino is exactly the same. Hispanic is actually very, very low. So this is the reason I wanted to include these two pie charts here. You can actually see Hispanic, which in the entire county of LA County, that's a vast majority of 64%. In Glendora, it's only 40%, small piece of the pie, relatively. Black African American populations are also lower than average. Very, very large white community within Glendora. So the largest piece of the pie for the Glendora district would be the white Caucasian populations. And that has to do with it is located in a higher socioeconomic area. Cost of living is much higher. And because of that, it is a more suburban white community, traditional white suburban community. I also wanted to show you guys the special programs. So English learners, there are 511. across the entire district, so relatively low, especially considering the location being in Southern California. The county average is 23%. This is only 6.7%. So again, very, very relatively low. And as I mentioned before, it is a more affluent city. So socioeconomically, the free reduced price meals is much lower than the county average of 67% at 29%. English learners. So again, the current enrollment is at 6.7%. Fluent English proficient, so there are even more of those at 10%. And the redesignated fluent English proficient since the prior year is about 49. So all relatively standard, at least for Glendora Unified. So next I want to go over the LCAP, the strategic plan that the district has laid out for itself. So the number one, there are four goals on the current LCAP. First one is student achievement. So as you can see here, they want to grow on the SBAC, ELA, and math scores, increase of 5% for all students. EL classification or reclassification rate, the goal is to increase that about 3% up to 17% overall. Also progression towards English proficiency on state assessment, an increase in that. So all trying to increase student achievement is the general goal for this first goal of student achievement. Parent engagement is another priority for the district. So maintaining district-wide parent education nights at a minimum of 3 across all of the school sites, and that actually happens at each school site. So site-level family night events, a minimum of 3 per site. They've been relatively successful with that as well. Translators for district and site-level events, minimum of 10 translated events for those that don't speak English well. Parent education events in the primary language. So we do have relatively large populations of not just Spanish speakers, but Arabic speakers and Mandarin Chinese speakers at Glendora. And for that, making sure that those parents are involved as well. Number 3 is the conditions of learning. A lot of this one is actually just maintaining where we're currently at. So adopting standards, aligned materials, so especially the new NGSS standards, Common Core, history, social science standards, maintaining a 9 out of 9 schools in good repair, rate of teacher misassignment maintaining at 0%, and student access to standards aligned materials maintaining at 100%. The final goal is student engagement and school climate. So district-wide attendance rate, so increase. It is a relatively high attendance rate, but increasing to 97%. Middle school dropout and high school dropout rates, trying to minimize those as much as possible. Middle school at 0%, high school less than 1%. The high school graduation maintaining at 98%, again, very high level. And then chronic absenteeism maintaining less than 6%. So all relatively standard, but these are the goals that Glendora has set out for itself. As far as the strengths go for the district, the number one strength that I can point out as a teacher working in this environment is that there is a very, very high level of teacher, counselor, and administration support and communication throughout the community. So teachers are very, very good at communicating with families, communicating with parents, communicating with the students themselves to make sure that everyone is on the same page, making sure that the student is doing the absolute best that they possibly can. Counselor involvement, we've got very, very involved, very passionate counselors that are meeting with students on a regular basis, making sure that those students are, again, doing as best as they can. And administration support, not only for the students themselves, but for the teachers and counselors. Administration is always very supportive, at least, again, for me and my colleagues that I have talked to, been very supportive of any opportunities that I would like to do to go out to further my own education to make sure that my students are getting the best possible education that they possibly can. Another strength would be extracurricular opportunities. So sports are actually a very big thing at Glendora, especially Glendora High School where I'm at. But beyond just sports, so we've got very successful soccer and football teams, swimming, water polo. Beyond that, though, going into marching band, we've got kind of a very highly rated marching band uh, choirs, very popular, drama. So a large variety of extracurricular opportunities for any type of student, not just students that are interested in sports. One that I have just actually started to get involved with myself is the AVID program. So Glendora is starting to kind of heavily invest in AVID training in their teachers. I actually was sponsored. I went to an AVID training this past summer to start implementing AVID strategies within my science classrooms. But the dedication that those AVID teachers and the AVID students themselves, the students that are enrolled in those AVID classes, I find that that is very important school-wide. So I try and implement strategies in my own classroom. I'm not an AVID teacher, but I implement them within my regular science classes. And those strategies just work across the board for all students. It's just good teaching strategies. And the school is actually being a lot more conducive to making sure that those students are supported, whether they are AVID students or just students that are utilizing those AVID strategies. Community involvement and communication is another strength. As I mentioned before, teachers, counselors, administration are in constant communication with parents and students to make sure that they are as involved as possible. As far as weaknesses go, technology and what goes along with that is technological infrastructure is easily one of the biggest weaknesses that I could say as a teacher currently working there, and through discussing it with my other colleagues as well. Currently, just to give you some perspective, within the science department, there are of 11 teachers. We have one Chrome cart that has to be shared amongst all of us. And we have block scheduling, so that means that if I'm going to try and use it across all my classes, I need it for 2 days in a row. That being said, I almost never have access to it. Also, even when I have access to that Chrome cart, so again, the lack of technology, the infrastructure itself, the Wi-Fi system, it's absolutely terrible. Half the Chromebooks won't even get connected to that Wi-Fi, so sometimes they're basically useless, and I have to avoid using technology in some cases just because I don't want to deal with the headache of are they going to work today or are they not. So that's definitely a huge weakness that I know the district themselves, they recognize it as a weakness and are starting to try and work towards bettering in introducing more technology, getting better infrastructure within Glendora High School and across all the schools in the district. Another thing is ELL, so English Learner Education Performance. I included this graph over here so that you can see suspension rate is very high in Glendora High School. Graduation rate is exceptionally high. English learner progress, though, it's in orange. It is actually relatively low compared to where it should be. So that's something that I wanted to point out as something that could absolutely be improved, is the support and performance levels for those English learner students. And finally, interdepartmental communication. So within the science department, I feel like we have pretty good communication. And in speaking with other teachers that work in other departments, they work well at communicating with themselves. But larger projects or anything that requires interdisciplinary communication, whether it is science to history or history to English or anything like that, that's actually lacking quite a bit. So that's definitely a weakness that I think could be worked on in the future. So recommendations that I have is, of course, kind of going along with those weaknesses that I just brought up, is investment in technology and infrastructure. We actually just, unfortunately, tried to pass a measure within the Glendora district area to get greater funding specifically to invest higher in infrastructure and technology. That was put to a vote in November during the November election, and unfortunately it did not pass. So we kind of have to go back to the drawing board. The district has to go back to the drawing board to try and figure out where we're going to get that additional funding. So that's where I bring in that second point out here, so seeking out additional funding sources. So that Measure GG, funding, it's not going to be coming through at this point. So we're going to have to try and find another way to get funding to support that technological and infrastructure increase. And finally, investment in EL education and success. So as I showed you on the previous graph, just making sure that teachers are well prepared to teach those English learner students. So I know as a general education teacher myself, I have not had many specific teacher training for dealing with students that come to my classroom and essentially don't speak any English at all. I don't speak another language, and therefore I feel like I should be better trained in order with strategies that I can help those students succeed. So better support in general for English learner education, along with personalized education plans and implementation for those students that need it most. So thank you for watching my presentation. Here's a list of my resources. So I would say easily one of the most beneficial sources that I used was that Glendora website itself, the Glendora Unified website, specifically the LCAP. I got a lot of information from that, as well as the Ed Data resource as well. That was especially helpful for getting the information that I needed. So again, I've been Josh Felcher. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation, and have a good night.